Welcome to the Missing Black Women Disparity Symposium. Please remain muted as you enter. This experience happening right now is a sound bath. It is being done to prepare us for today's symposium. Please use this time to reflect, pray, meditate, and/or set intentions for today's event. We are so glad that you are here with us. Thank you so very much, Moni. Welcome to the Missing Black Women Disparity Symposium. We are here to bring together some of the most influential experts in the area of this topic in the form of the Missing Black Women Disparity Task Force. I'm so grateful that I reached out to all these amazing women and they all jumped at the opportunity to come here this morning to educate all of you on this travesty that we are facing, which is a missing Black women disparity. According to FBI statistics, Black people account for the highest percentage of missing people in America. However, cases involving missing Black women are less likely to be solved. The issue is relevant and vital because public awareness directly affects the likelihood of a case being solved. The term missing white woman syndrome was created by reporter Gwen Ifill to explain the phenomenon that missing Black women and other women of color do not receive the same media attention given to white women who are missing. This disparity creates a crisis affecting the likelihood of women being found as they go missing. Research has identified that the amount of media coverage granted depends on several factors, including the victim's attractiveness, socioeconomic status, and race. According to law enforcement, media coverage of missing person cases increases the public's ability to identify the abductee, thereby increasing the likelihood of finding the missing person. I'm Casey Phillips Brown, and I'm a Doctor of Social Work candidate at the Cal Baptist University. And this symposium is a part of my innovation. And through my research, we identified that the theme of racism is identified as a contributing factor to the lack of attention to missing Black women in the media and law enforcement. The included studies found that missing white women syndrome creates what I've coined as missing Black women disparity that takes away attention from missing Black women. One of the theories that came to light during my research was the social learning theory. I've found that America is based on the idea that Black women are not worthy, should not be considered, are not a priority. And we've learned this throughout the years, whether it's from Thomas Jefferson and how he sexually assaulted the enslaved minor Sally Hemings and considered one of the founding fathers, but he taught us we don't care about Black women. We learned that we don't care about Black women from Dr. Marion Sims, who did, excuse me one second. He operated on Black women without any type of anesthesia, and we consider him to be the father of medicine. So again, we see that the social learning theory is why America is reluctant to care about Black women when we go missing. There's also a framing that takes place in the media. When white women go missing, they use buzzwords like, she's so youthful, so beautiful, a mother, so attractive. This encourages people to want to go and look for her, encourages people to run to their TV and try to find out what channel is it, where's the coverage? What are we talking about? What are they saying about this case now? Because now they are drawn into this person and they believe that she is worthy of being searched for. When Black women go missing, we get the opposite. We're either blamed, they put seductive pictures of us that they found on the internet that maybe we were just having fun one day, but that's the picture they choose to use to show, hey, this is the woman who's missing. And that impacts how the society sees us, how the public views Black women, and they're less likely to want to look for us. The findings indicate that there is a need to create awareness of missing Black women and that there is a lack of community engagement in cases involving missing Black women. These are the objectives that we will cover in today's Missing Black Women Disparity Symposium. The three objectives are to increase public awareness of missing Black women disparity via this symposium, to increase knowledge of solutions to address the missing Black women disparity, and to increase knowledge of resources when a Black woman is missing in a community. This is our program for today. If you, in the chat, we will put the Nan Washington Foundation website. And if you go to the website and click on the link under the Missing Black Women Disparity Symposium page, you will see the full program. This is what we are calling our Missing Black Women Disparity Task Force. These are the professionals, the experts who came together willingly out of love to come and talk to us today to help us learn much more about this topic than we ever knew. Where we have different panels on research and case studies, law enforcement, podcasts and YouTube true crime storytellers, the activists, those who focus on legislation, cybersecurity, and our community partners, which is Because We Believe Ministries. We will then have Q&A. Our panelists, our task force will have opportunity for their final remarks, and then we'll be closing. We will also have a survey at the end of this presentation. A winner will be chosen and be given a prize as a thank you for completing the survey. It's extremely important that you do that. So I hope that you stay around so we can have that information. Thank you. This is our first panel. The researchers panel discussion, understanding the root cause of the disparity. First, we have attorney Jada Moss, author of The Forgotten Victims of Missing White Women Syndrome, an examination of legal measures that contribute to the lack of search and recovery of missing Black girls and women. We also have Dr. Danielle Slakoff, co-author, Media Messages Surrounding Missing Women and Girls, the Missing White Women Syndrome, and Other Factors That Influence Newsworthiness. Again, you can go to the Nan Washington website and click on the page to see and view the full program to learn more about them. Hello, welcome Attorney Moss and Dr. Slakoff.
Hi, good afternoon. Hello. Or good morning where you are.
Well, it depends on where you are, right? So some of us is morning time,
Right.
Some of us is afternoon. Okay, so the first question I'd like to start off by, but first of all, for everyone who doesn't understand this, I'm kind of geeking out and fangirling out. For anyone who does any of this work, you have seen these two names. Some of you guys might be like, oh, who are they? And unless you've been checking our Instagram page, we've been talking about them a lot. But anyone who does any research on this topic has cited both of these two women. So I interviewed them, I believe last year, and they both kindly agreed to come here today. So I'm so grateful and thank you for coming here today. So this first question is for both of you. How do biases within law enforcement and media organizations affect the investigation and coverage of cases involving missing Black women? So I don't know who'd like to answer that first.
I can go first.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so bias plays a huge role in law enforcement, media organizations, and in society as a whole. It plays a huge role in the investigation and portrayal of Black women. In my note, I actually talked a lot about this, and I actually prefaced it with a background about the misrepresentation of Black people in media. I wanted to focus on the way that that we were portrayed in media, especially as it pertains to like TV shows, movies, and film. When you look at these things, you see Black and brown people portrayed often as the offender, as the perpetrator, as the bad guy. And oftentimes you see them juxtaposed with white characters in the same film or movies, where the white characters are actually portrayed on the opposite end of the spectrum. They're usually the victims. It's like the yin and yang, the bad and the good, where, Black is always bad, white is always good. I wanted to preface my note with this because I think that there is a link and a connection in the misrepresentation of Black and brown people in entertainment media and the underrepresentation of Black and brown people when it comes to victimization in news media. I think it's a huge connection and a huge link. And so I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. This bias actually is what led to the coining of the term, as you spoke about, missing white woman syndrome. Gwen Ifill, she was a PBS news anchor. She's a person who coined the term because she saw this disparity too. And basically what that term refers to is the media's tunnel vision-like focus on young, white, attractive, and often rich women. When it comes to law enforcement, also plays a huge role. So in law enforcement agencies, they're given a huge deal of discretion when it comes to how they choose to investigate missing persons cases, which can really be to the disservice of Black and Brown people. And we see that play out, especially when it comes to missing persons cases with the Amber Alert system. I talked about this a great deal also in my note. The Amber Alert system, it's been a great service for a lot of children. So a lot of children have actually been found through the alert system. But what we've seen is that it's a disservice to Black and Brown girls and boys when it comes to the search and recovery of those missing children. The issue with the Amber Alert system is that it has such a strict set of criteria. So what the alert system focuses on is law enforcement's reasonable belief that a child has either been abducted and is also in imminent danger. So if a law enforcement agency that is investigating that case doesn't believe that those two things have happened, they can choose not to pursue it and choose not to activate the alert system, which is a huge disservice to that group of people.
Thank you. Dr. Slakoff, the same question.
Absolutely.
How do the biases within law enforcement and media?
Yes. I have to say too that I am one of the people who cites Attorney Moss. So I completely agree with you that her work is so impactful. So I just wanted to kind of talk briefly about what I have found about the media specifically in my own work. So I actually looked at 4 years worth of newspaper stories about white and Black missing people, specifically women and girls, across 11 different newspapers. And what I found in that study with my colleague is that, yes, missing white women and girls received more initial coverage and they received more repeated coverage than the Black missing women and girls. And just to kind of give you a little bit more detail on that, missing Black women and girls accounted for about 20% of the news stories, but in reality, they account for 34% of the missing. So you can really see, to your term, that disparity in the media coverage there. And I do want to point out too that a lot of times when we talk about the missing white woman syndrome, we often talk about the numbers, right? The quantity of articles that are written. But in reality, it's also the quality of the articles that are written. And I say that because another colleague and I actually looked at how are white, Black, and Latina women and girl victims portrayed when they make it to the news. And we found that white women and girls were portrayed much more favorably. They were portrayed as innocent and blameless, whereas the Black and Latino women were portrayed as risk-taking or doing something bad or dangerous at the time that they were harmed. So I always like to say it's not just a quantity issue, it's also a quality issue. There needs to be changes to how women and girls of color are written about across the board. Now, how does the media impact this? So my researcher brain goes immediately to the money, right? We know that the missing white woman syndrome makes money. And what I mean by that is that newspapers and other media get advertising revenue from the amount of clicks and shares and things like that that their articles get. And that they know certain stories will get a lot of clicks, likes, shares, downloads. And so I really think that the money aspect is a huge reason why we continue to see the same type of victims get so much attention. There's also a huge lack of diversity in our newsrooms in the United States. There was a book that came out in 2014. A researcher named Richard Craig said that 0.6, meaning less than 1% of our American television stations are owned by Black Americans. So I think that that is a huge issue as well as to how the media impacts this. I'm sure the Black and Missing Foundation will be mentioned today, but I think the world of Natalie and Derica, and they also talk about the fact that newsroom diversity is a huge issue and that our newsrooms need to look more like our communities. On the policing side, so I have to kind of shout out Carol Liebler. She's a researcher in this area. She actually did a study where she talked to multiple people in the newsmaking process. And what she found, or what they basically concluded, her and her colleagues, was that the police were a driving force behind which cases even get the media attention. What I mean by that is that if the media is given, an alert from the police, then the media is much more likely to immediately put that up. And what they found is that those alerts from the police to the media were a huge driver of who got that attention. So another reason why this is problematic is because research shows that police are much more likely to identify Black and Latino people as runaways rather than true missing people. And so I really don't think we can discount the police and also being a major factor in why there's less media attention.
Well, I think what you're saying is part of the reason why I came up with the term missing Black women disparity when I was doing my research. And for those of you who don't know, you have to do research. You go on to Google Scholars, or you go into a library and you put in a topic. And I kept putting in missing Black women, and I was really only getting a few articles, right? The articles that you two wrote, it was very limited. In order for me to get the information I needed, I had to put in missing white woman syndrome. And so it hit me, and I thought, even to do research, we're not centered, right? We have to use someone else's term or use someone else to describe the white woman or someone else to find out information about us. So that's why we're here, to get to the root of this and to figure out what we can do to solve it. Attorney Moss, are there specific policy changes needed to address the disparity in missing Black women? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, so I talked a lot about this in my note as well. And what's funny is I wrote my note back in 2018/2019 is when it was published, but I think my recommendations still say the same, honestly. So I have three major ones. The first one are the alert systems, which I've talked a little bit about already. We see that the Amber Alert system, it works in some cases, but it's still flawed for the reasons I've already named. Updates to the existing alert systems like the Amber Alert system would greatly benefit missing white women syndrome and the people who are impacted by it, and the creation of tailored systems to help find those people. I'm happy to say that we've seen a lot of progress since I actually did write my note. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So I want to highlight two different alert systems that are actually based out of California. One of them came into play this year. Actually, it became effective, the Ebony Alert System. It's a California alert system that's designed to bridge the gap in the racial disparity in missing persons cases. As far as effectiveness, we don't really know, since it's so new. It came out in January 1st is when it became effective as a law. So we don't really know if it's actually worked to the benefit of missing Black girls. I think it goes up to the age of 25. So it's for missing Black girls and women at this point. The alert system, from what I saw, the criteria doesn't specifically call out Black women or Black girls, but when you look at the mission statement for the law, it actually does talk about wanting to address the disparity and specifically help Black women and girls. So that's definitely progress. The second alert system that I want to highlight is for brown people, specifically Indigenous people. It's called the Feather Alert, and that's actually in California as well. That became law in 2022. And we've seen sort of like varied, whether it's helped effectiveness, varied effectiveness for it. Some of the Indigenous people who actually benefit from it say that maybe it's not always a benefit and there's still some flaws in it. So maybe there's still some work to be done in that area, but I think it's definitely still progress. The second one I want to highlight is law enforcement agencies. We've both Danielle and I have actually talked about this, but law enforcement agencies, definitely there needs to be pressure applied to these agencies to help them apply resources in these cases. Oftentimes it's to their discretion whether or not they want to use resources and whether or not they want to actually investigate these cases. And maybe it shouldn't be up to them. Maybe the determination shouldn't just fall on them to make that decision, because we know just historically law enforcement agencies are flawed. And so maybe they shouldn't have, the onus should not be placed on them to investigate the cases. The last one, actually, Danielle just spoke about as well, is diverse newsrooms. So a 2018 study on diversity was actually done on newsrooms. And what it found is that newsrooms tend to be white and male, which is really not a surprise or a shock to anyone here, I'm sure, but that needs to change. I think that in the past probably 5 years, it's definitely changed and more awareness to this issue has happened. I've seen it with my own eyes, just being reached out to from various reporters who are interested in the issue and the topic and who actually want to highlight more missing Black and brown people. So I think there's progress that has been made in all three of these areas, but there's still more progress to be made.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Slakoff. Well, before I go there, actually, I was checking the time, just make sure we had a little bit of time. You mentioned the Ebony Alert, right? When that came out, there was a lot of controversy about that. And I saw some faces, even on some of our panels, faces when you mentioned it. There's some people who are really upset about it. I don't know if those of you who are on this symposium, if you heard, some people had some really strong opinions. So I do want, if we have a little bit of time in this panel, to talk a little bit about that. Yeah, I see you, Ronetta. You want to, when we go to the QA on this, I don't want to forget, but I do want to talk about it because some people are saying it's very frustrating that that they have the Ebony Alert. So I will talk about that in a moment. Dr. Slakoff, how can academic institutions and researchers contribute to ongoing efforts to understand and address this critical issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am currently a assistant professor of criminal justice at Sacramento State University. So I actually teach I teach largely about women's issues as well as media and crime. And so I think that, academic institutions do play an important role. One of the things that I find in my research, and this also includes Indigenous women, is that the data collection and analysis on missing people, and especially missing people of color, there's been challenges throughout the years. So I think one way that academic institutions can be helpful is to collaborate with nonprofit agencies, law enforcement, community groups to try to collect data information about missing Black women and missing women and girls of color. I also think, to Attorney Moss's point, that policy advocacy is really a key role that I think researchers and academics have. Being able to talk about these issues, being able to do things like this, to be completely honest with you, and I have to say thank you, Casey, for including me in this. Being able to talk to people who are changing lives, changing policy, bringing attention, that's really what this is all about. So I'm so thankful to be here. I also think awareness and education is key. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. It is early in the morning here. I think that bringing attention, awareness and education to students, I think that as a professor, it makes sense that that's a key role that I have. But, I am a professor of criminal justice. Many of my students are considering careers in law enforcement, in nonprofit organizations, as victim advocates, as social workers, right? So I think that that's really a key way, is making a change in the classroom and talking about these issues. I feel grateful to be teaching in California because we are able to teach about these issues. I'm sure many of you have heard that in other states, being able to teach on these issues is coming under attack. So I do feel grateful to be in California and be able to teach about these issues in the classroom for sure. So I really think it's data collection, policy advocacy, awareness, and education. That's where I think academia fits into this. And again, I appreciate being here, and I can't wait to learn from everybody today. And I'm already learning from Attorney Moss.
So as we end your particular panel, I just want to check in with Dr. Slakoff and Attorney Moss to see if there's anything in addition that you meant to say and didn't have a chance to say. And we'll also offer you opportunity at the end of the symposium to let us know how we can assist you in your work. But for right now, anything in regards to the missing Black women disparity that you meant to say that you want to just to add on before we ask a couple of questions?
The one thing I'll say just quickly, because it didn't fit neatly into either question, was I'm noticing a trend. And again, I haven't done the research. I don't know if this is just something that I've noticed, but I'm noticing a trend in especially women and girls of color's families and friends using social media to really put that pressure on mainstream media to cover this case. And on one hand, I think it's great that we're seeing there's some success, but on the other hand, I think that is a huge ask of anybody who is experiencing grief or ambiguous grief in the loss of somebody. And so I just wanted to, again, this is like my research brain. I feel like there's something there where mainstream media is kind of looking at social media and saying, oh, this is going viral, I'm going to cover this, right? We saw this with Lauren Smithfields and some other So that, I guess that's just the one thing I wanted to mention, is that that's been on my mind recently, is how social media is impacting mainstream media.
I think that's a great point. And I'll just kind of piggyback. I think it's great. And we've seen definitely an uptick in people talking about these issues on social media. Like you said, I haven't done the research on it, but I would assume that there's definitely been some pressure put on mainstream media to cover these topics now that social media is definitely in an uproar about it. One thing that I would highlight about social media is sometimes it can be really frustrating, right? Because people really want to talk about these issues and they want to get it right. And so I don't think there's a lack of good intention there, but sometimes there's a lot of misinformation that's passed on social media as well. And so it can be tough to combat that, but definitely I would like to see in the future some research on that because I think it's a good topic to follow.
Well, it sounds like the three of us need to work together on a paper. We'll talk about that later.
I won't say no.
Ronetta of Massage and Wild Murder podcast. I wanted to just check in and to see if you wanted to talk a little bit about the Ebony Alert. I know I saw your face when it was mentioned, and it is a resource, but I know there is some controversy regarding it. We have a few more minutes in this panel if you'd like to add anything, and if someone wants to add anything in chat or raise your hand, just let me know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not that I don't believe that there's a need for it. I definitely do. I guess my gripe is that we are trusting the same law enforcement communities to activate the alerts when they already don't activate the ones we have for us. So to me, it just felt like a big publicity stunt in the wake of the work that Minnesota has been, leading the charge in with the missing and murdered African American women legislation and task force that they have there. So it just really felt very optical to me, and I'm not really one for the BS, for lack of better language. So, in case in point, we just had a young lady here in my community in South Los Angeles who went missing, had been missing for several days before they even activated the alert. The day they activated the alert, they found this young girl. Why did they wait so long? It wasn't like her family hadn't been saying that she was missing, that everyone on social media wasn't talking about it. They simply just didn't do it. So, they proved my point at every turn. And so that's really the issue that I have. But, I still have appreciation for, the thought, I guess.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or thoughts about the Ebony Alert? I did see that, and I spoke to someone, and someone said it worked twice that they noticed. So I'm hoping that even though it may not have the best intentions, that it is going to be something that is going to be very beneficial for all of us. Before we move on out of this panel, are there any questions in the chat regarding for our researchers?
Hello, this is Dr. Burton, and I just want to add that what the researchers are talking about is very, very important. But as with history, as a people and as supporters, we have to keep this fight going, because history shows us that when it came to brown or Black people, whatever the process established was always a slower process. But as a people, we have to keep fighting. We have to write our letters. We have to make our complaints to our congressmen, our senators, to ensure that the process keeps going. Because the minute you quit talking, it will be dropped. We also have to maintain the things that we used to do. We put signs out, put the person's picture up in the neighborhood, in the grocery store, until the process is where it is and is on equal footing. We cannot let our guard down on any of what we did leading up to legislation or appropriate electronic processes. And that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Burton. We will be hearing from Dr. Burton. She will be our final panelist, and she will be educating us at the end of the symposium on cybersecurity and how that impacts missing Black women disparity. Okay. Thank you so very much, Attorney Moss and Dr. Slakoff. I just wanted to let you all know that I have been pronouncing Dr. Slakoff's name wrong in my head, but she sent me an email to say, just to remember, it's Slakoff, like Slay Girl Slay. I said, well, okay. So for those of you who are going to talk about her, please know it's about the Slay. Thank you so very much for both of your times, and we hope you can stay on with us because we do want to hear at the end how we can be of assistance to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Next, we'll be looking at the case studies, examining real-life examples of missing Black women and their family members. We will start. I don't believe Shadira is here yet.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Are you here? Oh, you're on a different name. Okay. Okay, so the three families that we will be highlighting, Shadira Lee and her sister, Crystal Anderson, Shalissa Collier, the mother of Mikeana Johnson, and Tiffany Alvoyd, sister of Cynthia Batrayor.
I'm trying to see. Can you see me? I have a new phone. I'm trying to figure out. I'm at work. I'm sorry. Can you see me?
No.
No. Okay, hold on. Let me try this again.
One moment.
I've been here the whole time, but I see everyone else.
No problem, no problem, as long as you're here.
There you are. I see you, Shadira.
See me? Okay. I'm sorry. I have a little stuffy nose. Sorry.
I know, we appreciate you coming on, even though you weren't feeling well. Thank you so much. Okay. So Shadira, tell us briefly about Crystal and her story.
So my sister Crystal Anderson was kidnapped August of 22 and pronounced deceased, murdered, basically based on circumstantial evidence, and she has not been found as of today.
What is the current status of the case when you speak to law enforcement?
Well, for one, I have to constantly reach out to law enforcement or reach out to investigator Cleveland, which she's basically been absolutely great in keeping me in the loop of what's going on. But as of now, there is no further updates. The last I spoke to the investigator was a couple of days ago that they're going to get DNA from my niece that I have here with me in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they're trying to collect DNA samples from the other children. Other than any type of evidence or moving forward, I haven't heard anything, and it's just kind of frustrating sometimes.
Okay. On the screen, you should see some information about Crystal. We are asking that you all try to share the information that you will be seeing on the screen regarding families. I've tried to include the hashtags so that you can share those hashtags right now while we're here in the symposium. Please feel free to copy those hashtags and put them on your social media. I know you're gonna be doing two different things, right? You're on this symposium, but try to go ahead or you could do it later, but we really want to make sure the hashtags Justice for Crystal and Bring Crystal Home, that we can get that out today and forward, right? We wanna give these families as much attention as possible and know how much, so we can show them how much we're here to support them. So one question I'd like to ask you, Shadira, is what would you have wanted more from the community in regards to searching for Crystal? Shadir, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. What is it that you would have wanted more from the community? What do you think would have helped us find Crystal? And I'm going to be asking these questions of the family, and I want the attendees to please not take this in the wrong way that, you know, oh, they're complaining that we're not doing enough. We're really just trying to find solutions here. So we do want to hear from them what we could do.
One of the things that the ladies mentioned earlier was about going to social media, and that was really my outlet. When I couldn't get through to law enforcement and I felt alone, and this was before I even met Investigator Cleveland, I didn't know where to go. So the first thing I did was turn to social media and hoping that you know, I would get enough shares and enough people would pass on the information of what I was going through that it would fall into the right hands of someone. And eventually it did. A reporter from South Carolina, after all the people who would not listen to me or give me the opportunity to tell them what was going on, she finally put Crystal's story on the news. And from that point, more and more news stations started opening up and allowing me that platform to get Crystal's story out. But before that, social media was my only outlet. And it's just a shame that we have to go to social media, because when you're going through something and you're in the process of searching for a family member, the last thing you want to have to do is constantly go back and forth on social media, check messages and check your text messages. I didn't want to have to do those things, but I had to, in hopes that the right person, the right people would reach out to me at some point. And because of that, some people I may have overlooked that could have been possibly a right connection, because it was so overwhelming when you have thousands of people at one time trying to help you. And most of these people I don't even know, but I am so grateful for all of the you know, the work that they put in by sharing Crystal's story and just supporting me even to this day.
Thank you, Shadira. Again, I know you were under the weather. I really appreciate you just still coming on here and sharing Crystal's story. We're hoping that more people will be able to go to your page as well, both your Instagram page and your Facebook page, as well as follow the hashtags Justice for Crystal and Bring Crystal Home, so that you can still, so that we can get more awareness out there regarding Crystal's case. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We now will have, this is Shalissa Collier, mother of Mikeana Johnson. So there's an update on the case. There has recently been the arrest of a person of interest, and the trial started yesterday. So we did not expect Shalissa to come on. She has been such a supporter of the Nan Washington Global Wellness Foundation and a supporter of the Missing Black Women Disparity Symposium. We really appreciate everything she's done, but we had to understand that it may have been very difficult for her to come on today. So I interviewed Shalissa a year and a half ago. I did want to read some of the information that she shared with me during our interview. Again, for anyone who has met Shalissa, she is no holds bar. Someone, Ronetta can attest to that. She is going to say what she is going to say. So I'm going to use her language and speak how she would speak if she was here. So when I asked Shalissa, and I'm going to be reading from the paper, what could the community have done to assist your daughter? And she said they could have had a heart. They could have looked at her as a member of their family. You don't want people to sit on their butts and not help. We found her because a lady saw a flyer regarding her car and told us where it was parked. She cared enough to give us that information, and we were able to find my daughter. People then started sharing the flyers. We started posting the flyers in California, and a lady in Texas responded. We made our own flyers. No one was helping. Our nieces and family members passed them out. We're supposed to be a family. There's less worry right now and less concern. My daughter stayed in that area around 92nd and 102nd between Normandy and Budlong. You would think neighbors would care. They didn't. They moved on like, oh, well, it is what it is. Once community understands that, hey, this is one of ours, we can see change. Other people have helicopters and search teams. We can't get people to pass out flyers or even post them in their stores. I was only able to put up a flyer in one shopping center because I came there all the time. So the store owner allowed me to put one up. I then asked Shalissa, what is the greatest need for the family when their loved one goes missing? Family needs a village to provide support. The only way I made it through was because of my husband and my mother. They need to provide services for families, a 24-hour hotline. I never would have thought I would be doing this for one of my kids. My family support got me through this. People only need sincere help, not someone just being around for clout. I never got therapy, although I lost my dad in 2000, my grandma in 2010, my grandpa in 2015, and my daughter in 2020. After my daughter died, I tried to have therapy 3 times. The first time the therapist had to leave. And then I was in therapy 2 more times. The community also needs to support for the fathers of the victims. My daughter's father was so upset he had to be put on suicide watch. The families, especially the mothers, need people to check in on them. They need people to help them get out of the house and provide extra support. I haven't been able to run my home business since my daughter died. That would have kept me active. My need for support is like a sisterhood. When someone loses their child, they need someone to buy gift cards, not necessarily food, because I don't know and eat from everyone's house, but they need maybe to buy gift cards or restaurants and for stores. They also need mentorship, someone to help walk them through what the healing looks like and what to expect. I don't want any mother to go through what I went through. During the time Shalissa was grieving for her daughter, Mikeana, she came up with the idea to create the Mother's Brunch, which we were able to assist her with Misogyny While Murder podcast and the Nan Washington Global Wellness Foundation, partnered with Mikeana Johnson Foundation for the inaugural Mother's Brunch, September 9th of 2023, where Shalissa honored other mothers who lost their daughter to missingness and to domestic violence. The strength that she showed is just amazing to me, because the fact that you were able to create a foundation and then not just focus on yourself, but to focus on others is so admirable. For those of you who are interested, we will be doing the 2nd annual Mother's Brunch in the Los Angeles area in October during domestic violence in October 2024. So please follow the Mikeana Johnson Foundation on Instagram if you want information for the upcoming 2nd annual Mother's Brunch, as well as you can follow the Misogyny While Murder podcast or the Nan Washington Foundation. Thank you from Shalissa. And please, everyone, if you pray, keep her in your prayers as this trial is starting. Yes, you're happy that there's an arrest, but there's a murder trial because your daughter is gone. So please keep her in your thoughts. Okay, next we will have Tiffany Alvoyd, who will be discussing her sister who has been missing since February 2021. Hello, Tiffany.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to I'm just thankful to God to have this opportunity to speak to everyone, and also just wanted to thank you for hosting this and doing this symposium and allowing me to speak today. So thank you very much. To get right to it, my sister, Cynthia Bertroye, she disappeared on February 3rd, 2021. She didn't come home that night, and so her son had reached out and shared that she wasn't, she didn't come home. Her car was found about I guess it was like 11 days later. But initially, when we first heard that she was missing, we were alarmed and started calling around. But then her ex-husband, they were going through a divorce. He shared with my father that Cynthia actually was in the hospital. So at that point, search efforts stopped because we thought that she was in the hospital. So another 2 or 3 days passed, and my mother continued to call the hospital. And finally, a night nurse had mercy on her and just basically told her, Cynthia is not in the hospital. She's never been here. I don't know why you were told that. And so at that point, we realized that Cynthia has been missing all this time, and we try to get the search efforts going again. We've had some real difficulties with the police. They were not only just not really interested in looking for her, they were saying things like Cynthia just walked off, she just started a new life, things that I'm sure others have heard. But there were also places where they were actually obstructionists. So for example, they were supposed to list Cynthia's fingerprints and her dental records to the NamUs national database. They told my mother that they had done that, but it was 11 months later when they actually uploaded it, even though they had access to that information a long time ago. We had been pushing for them to do DNA in Cynthia's car because our understanding is that she was actually kidnapped from the Shell gas station that she was last seen in Grandview, Texas. The police, when her car showed up, they told my mother just to come pick it up. There really wasn't any sense of urgency of doing DNA in her car. And so after a lot of arguing back and forth, they said that they did do DNA. But then when we pushed for the results, they said that they couldn't give it to us. So this went on for several months. In the meantime, my mother was starting to think that we couldn't trust them. So she found other places that would do DNA on the vehicle. They agreed to do it. But then when they would call the police to get the details, they would call my mother back and say, sorry, we can't do the DNA in the car. Either we won't do it or it won't stand up in court. And that happened at least 6 different times. And so the other piece of this that tended to look obstructionist in our eyes is that there was video of Cynthia taken when she was at that Shell gas station. The last place she was seen was that gas station. And as you know, most gas stations have video. And so there's at least 6 videos of her at that gas station. The owner of the gas station shared that with us, and he said that they had turned it over to police. We did a FOIA request, which is a Freedom of Information Act request, meaning when you get that to a government agency, they are supposed to give you the information that you're requesting. They refused to give us all 6 videos. They gave us 2 and they were heavily redacted. But even in the videos that we have, you can see that Cynthia's in her car with 2 individuals that she does not know. And it looks as if she was struck in the head and then they drove off with her. Now, that's on video, but the police have had no interest in finding out who these individuals are. Those individuals came in the store, so they are identifiable, but they're not interested in finding those individuals. There's license plates that are available on that video. There's a lot of things on there that they could have done more. And so when we're saying obstructionist, it's based on these other behaviors that we're seeing where they're just not even trying to look for her. And so at this point, we started the Find Cynthia Coalition. I'm an attorney. I went to UCLA School of Law, and so supporters of Cynthia, my family members, and also several of my law school classmates decided to band together to do a coalition because it was clear the police are not interested in looking into her case. The goals that we have as a coalition is that ultimately we want Cynthia's case investigated by the FBI. The Crawley Police Department, the Grandview Police Department, they've made it clear that they can't be trusted to actually give her a fair investigation. And so that's why we're asking for the FBI to actually review all the videos that are available, see if it's still optional to get the DNA out of her car. Also to check on her cell phone because the police are in a possession of her cell phone to see if they can check the cell towers to see where her car is. Because another piece of this that I forgot to mention was that they gave us conflicting stories as to how they came to have her cell phone. And so that's ultimately what we're pushing for is for FBI investigation. But the other thing that we're wanting is that we realize that Cynthia is not the only person who their loved ones were not able to get any answers and the police aren't doing anything. And so what we're wanting to do is have a law passed called Cynthia's Law. And what that law would be is that if a woman of color or someone with a disability goes missing, the police will be required to do special or specific things to find them. And that would be, they must contact the media. They must do DNA testing if their person's car shows up. They must look into the cell phone if they have that person's cell phone. Basically, it's nothing special, but it's basically the things that they automatically do for privileged white women. And so that is the long-term goal that we're pushing for. And at this point, we have been meeting with members of Congress. One of the reasons I was happy to come to this meeting is that I was hoping that there would be those who would be interested in pushing this forward with us and would be interested in coalition building together, and us having a trip to go to DC to actually have discussions with the members of Congress about there being an ultimate law on the books about this. Because at this point, which I think you all talked about earlier, the police have allowed a wide discretion about how they want to investigate a case. And I think it's pretty clear that they shouldn't be having that power to do that, because they don't always use it judiciously. And people operate on bias. We're in an environment that we know is based on systemic racism, and that permeates every single area of society, especially and including how the police interact with families. I know we're on a short time, so I won't go into details about even how the police were talking to my family and talking to us. But that's our ultimate goal, is that we would like it to be where that's not something that people can just do. And the other part of that law that I think would be helpful is that there's a cause of action for family members, meaning if the police do not follow this process, that they're open to disciplinary action by the police department, but that also family members have a cause of action that they can bring against the police to be compensated if they're not following what they're supposed to be doing.
Thank you so very much, Tiffany, for joining us. I'm so glad Kathy Evans, K Black Love, reached out to me and was like, hey, I have someone who wants to come on and tell her sister's story. And this was a perfect opportunity for us to support you in real time. We don't want to just have you come talk and let it end. So everyone, again, while you're here, if you're on your phones, please go ahead, search the hashtag Finding Cynthia, post something while we're here, post a picture, Finding Cynthia. We want to try to make as much noise and get as much awareness out as possible, just even right here in this moment. Tiffany, I saw some people in the chat saying they'd love to help you. If you could please send me the information that you want people to, how they want them to contact you, and we can get that out to anyone. If anyone wants to help Tiffany, please reach out to us. We will definitely make sure we make that connection. We want to be a big support. This is not the first time we're going to have this symposium. So again, if we need to do another one in another area that's going to make it, get that word out, let us know and we can make sure that happens. Okay.
My mother is here, and I'm sorry, my mother is here, and she wanted to say one thing.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you.
I give praises to God, but I wanted to say that what they do in my dealings with the police, they just, no matter what the family says, I told them over and over again, I had people call that Cynthia would never leave her family. And so what they do, they know, they have a thing that what they do, they just label them as a person, a runaway or an abandoned, like they abandoned their family, that they put it on the victim. And I think that that should be against the law. If you don't have any proof of that, they don't have to have a proof of why they labeled the person. They come up with that so they don't have to look for them. And they would say things to me like, oh, there's no law with her just, leaving or whatever. And then they would make up a story, the reason that, like they said, she walked off park, because I did a lot of investigation. So I said, you mean to tell me you think my daughter walked off and parked her car on Waco in the middle of a storm and just walked off? And so then the next day he came up and said that Cynthia had a truck driver boyfriend. None of those things are true. So what I'm saying is there should be a law that they can't just come up with a narrative. So they come up with a narrative so they don't have to look for you. They just stamp it. She's just abandoned, and then that's the end of it. And there is no investigation. And thank you.
Thank you, Mom. And then the last thing we would say is that Cynthia was covered in the Black Girl Gone podcast. And she did a 2-part series on Cynthia, and actually her second episode, she really went in deep about all the places where the police were actually just being straight up obstructionists, not even just being incompetent, but actually getting to the point where you're actually stopping us from trying to move forward on her case. And then we do have a website for Cynthia. It's www.findcynthia.com. And on that is where we have all the template letters. If you want to write a letter on her behalf. A lot of, and then also her to follow us on social media. All her social media things are on there. So please feel free to look on that as well.
Okay, so definitely, Tiffany, at the end, when we ask for the final remarks and how we can help you, please have that information. You can send it directly to Missing Black Women Disparity chat in the chat. Send it directly to her, and she will get that out. Shadira would like to add something, and then we have about 2 more minutes, and we'll be transitioning to the next 2 panels, and then we'll take a break. We'll be taking a break exactly at 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Shadira, did you want to add a little something there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry if you can't see me. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I wanted to say, like in Crystal's case, one of the things that I noticed was that when I found out that Crystal was missing, and at that time I was in communication with Tony Berry, which is now locked up for her murder, was that I initially told him to reach out to law enforcement to make the report because he was in South Carolina and he was the last person that saw her. And what I realized is that whoever makes that initial call, they're the ones who set the tone at the beginning for the investigation, because he had the opportunity to paint this picture of Crystal in a way that was so negative that by the time I reached out to law enforcement, they already had an image in her, this seed planted that the murderer planted in their head, and it made the investigation very hard for the family because at that point, law enforcement, they basically did not help us after Tony made that phone call.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that is that is a really important information, Shadira, that the family tries to be the first to get the information out so they can set the tone of the investigation. So thank you to the families, both Tiffany and to Shadira, and I hope I represented Shalissa to try my best to get her cadence and her oomph in there. And we want you to please support the families after this. This is not going to be the last time. We want you all to think of them. Please get those hashtags out. Please do your best to make sure that we say their names and that we are creating this awareness. Okay. Thank you. All right. We now have, please forgive me, there it is. How to engage law enforcement. Okay. Britt Morris is the founder and CEO of the Morris Young Legacy House. Britt is an LAPD sergeant, CEO of a mental health nonprofit organization, and a multifaceted professional with 16 plus years of experience spanning law, philanthropy, and law enforcement management, including providing an expert curricula for California's police academies. And she is, again, she's an LAPD sergeant. We also have investigator Chandra Cleveland. Dr. Cleveland is a safety expert for women and girls with over 38 plus years of experience in the field of law enforcement. She has brought home over 500 missing Black women. Investigator Cleveland has been very instrumental in rescuing hundreds of victims of sex trafficking in our communities and continues to be a voice to inform parents of the latest social media dangers. Chandra was a hired investigator in the case of missing cheerleader Gabby Swainson and was responsible for convincing law enforcement that Gabby had been abducted. She had been labeled a runaway. She's also been seen on Nancy Grace, Michael Baisden's show, Yolanda Adams' show, and Black and Missing. If you want to learn more about any of our Missing Black Women Disparity Task Force members, our panelists, please go to the Nan Washington Foundation website and click on our symposium page to view the full program. Hello, welcome, Britt and Investigator Cleveland. I call you Sergeant Morris.
Thank you so much, Casey. It's okay.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning. Okay, so we have a couple of different questions for both of you. So, and am I calling you Britt? Is that fine?
Yes,
Okay.
Britt's fine.
All right, Britt. So here's some questions for you. Do you have recommendations on how to navigate and foster collaboration between law enforcement agencies and activist groups in the search for missing Black women?
Certainly. I first want to say thank you, Casey, for putting this symposium together. thank you to the families who shared your stories and those of your loved ones. Thank you for all the commenters, because it really shows that it does take a village to get anything, especially in our communities, done. So I want to say that to effectively foster collaboration, I think, between law enforcement agencies, activist groups, families, and loved ones, those adjacent to the missing, because we know that there's a myriad of reasons why people do end up classified as missing, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's abduction, whether it's domestic violence, it runs the gamut. Yes, there are those who walk off because of mental health issues, etc. But I think that for the missing Black woman case, it's essential to pursue legislative changes like those that we've seen with the Ebony Alert, the Feather Alert, and of course the names could have been a little bit more creative in terms of not being so on the nose. But I think in terms of pendulum swinging and changing a culture, sometimes you have to kind of bust through and kind of be loud and boisterous to kind of get the pieces out on the table so we can start putting things together. But definitely promoting dialogue and fostering cooperation, advocating for awareness and investigations. I do want to say that for law enforcement agencies, we're talking about systems, and we know historically how systems have been set up for and against different groups. But in order to move or turn a big ship, the legislation has to start there, because law enforcement agencies are mandated to follow legislation. They have to put their policies so that they're in compliance. Otherwise, a host of things can happen. Of course, things fall through the cracks, things are ugly, but we have to start somewhere. And I think legislation starts there. We start with legislation, lobbying for nationwide implementation of legislation, not just these pockets of, oh, we'll help this community in this state, things like that. Also, creating open communication channels, right? Joint task force, symposiums like this that kind of bring people who otherwise would not be connected because we're kind of siloed together on the same page, or at least in the same book, providing cultural competency for not only law enforcement, but for individuals who have to understand the culture of law enforcement, for the culture of what creating laws are. And also, law enforcement personnel can further enhance collaboration and mutual understanding, addressing historical tensions, because when you don't cite the elephant in the room, the elephant in the room can mess up a whole lot of things, and we just like, oh, keep status quo. So I think it's important for that, because in order to eradicate the disparity, it has to be called out in all the policies that are attached to it. And further, empowering families of missing Black women who have personal and emotional investments in resolving these cases. I think that's paramount as well. Involving families in the search process, keeping them abreast of investigative updates, not only provides them with a sense of agency, but also closure when they locate their loved ones, safe or otherwise. It also helps close the gap and prevent further victimization of missing women and their loved ones. Then engaging families in the decision-making processes, providing support services, and ensuring that their voices are heard throughout the investigation can significantly contribute to a more cohesive and effective approach in addressing these issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Cleveland, can you talk to us about the importance of the family finding the right organizations to assist them?
Thank you. Thank you for having me this morning. And I tell you, this is so much needed, and I am so grateful for the families to stand up and speak out. I want to make sure that I address the elephant in the room, and that is law enforcement. They are a major force of all of families getting the information they deserve. And it's so important that when your loved one goes missing, that you find someone immediately, because we know as time is of essence, that you find someone immediately that is credible and knowledgeable in their field in order to get the information out about your loved one. So many times I see people that go through things, and now I just help them to solve another 3-year-old missing male case because of information that was left out, that law enforcement got other information that redirected them in another spot, which they forgot about what they got at the beginning. And I'll go with Crystal's case right now because it's very pertinent that, Shadira is here, that when they started, as she said before, her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend at the time, painted a picture that started the whole investigation going in a different direction. Shadira and I met on a time where it was almost, I would think, 3 or 4 days within investigation. After I saw and met with her and heard the recordings of the officers and the way they spoke to her, I knew that I had to step forward and put myself in the equation. When you get someone who knows how to operate the system when someone goes missing, they will not try the bull. They will not try the BS on you because you know how it's supposed to go. When I stepped in on Crystal's case, I was able to pull in not only other police departments within the area, but also our SLED investigators into the mix because I pointed out detailed discrepancies of the investigation, which call for them to step in. This other case that I just solved, that I just helped solve, they had the wrong organization. So it's so important for you to have the right organization. And if you decide to hire a PI, you have to know that that PI can only do but so much. As we heard, law enforcement will get together to cover a lie. They will cover a lie like no other. So when you're doing this and you're going into it, you have to make sure that you get someone involved that can direct you in the right way and have the right resources, because all of the stations that I had connection with, we made sure that Crystal's face was on every single one of them. It wasn't a question after getting involved. So when families know that, first of all, the organization is important to get it out there. And as we have said earlier, social media is like our bestie. If we're not on TV, we have enough of us in this world that can flood the internet with getting out information on our loved ones. We have to know that we're so, I should say, our attention is so directed. I mean, we can direct our attention on to one thing for a little while, and then we go on to something else. We have to make sure we stay focused on the loved one and keep promoting things from time to time to let them know her name is not forgotten. His name is not forgotten. We need to make sure that we're all working for one purpose. And everybody that's on here today that is listening, if we all went in the same direction to help these families in order to bring their loved ones home, we could make a very, very big difference. And our local legislation is where it starts.
Yes, you just touched on a part, Dr. Cleveland, when you mentioned we have to be careful who we surround ourselves with, right? And being careful who reaches out to you. So when we did, funny story, when we helped the Mikeana Johnson Foundation with the inaugural Mother's Brunch, Ronetta, right out from Massage My Murder, she reached out to Shadira to invite her and her mom to come and be celebrated during this Mother's Brunch. And you have someone who did a story on your sister, okay, but she doesn't know Ronetta, right? So Ronetta and I talked about it with Shalissa, and everyone was like, yes, let's send them. So we had Shadira, and we were like, can you guys come out? And she was like, we don't know you. She was you guys later told us when we, after we met with you, that you were very nervous. Like, who are these people talking about? We're going to fly you out and bring you out here to California to honor you. But it could have been people who really take advantage of families who are in these situations. So Shadira brought Investigator Cleveland as her backup. She was like, I am not coming by myself. So just thank you for coming with Shadira and helping her to feel safe, because it is hard. We could have been anyone saying, hey, we want to, honor you. And it could have been someone with some, some very poor intentions. So thank you for supporting Shadira and that you guys believed us. And I'm sure you researched us. I was like, oh my gosh, she's probably researching me right now. I hope I got some good stuff on the internet about myself.
Can I speak to that quickly, Casey? about knowing and vetting, because individuals in Miss Chandra and in my case, right? So we straddle two communities. So we never know if somebody come and debate and switch us when they invite us out for events such as this, and they want us to holistically and genuinely and authentically try to bridge a gap or try to problem solve, and then they flip it, and now it's like war on you know what. And so it's like, whoa, wasn't ready for that. So that is so important, because that is, you can extrapolate that idea and put it with victims, family members of victims, and you know, insert any special group, you know, here. And it's very scary. It's very and it's sad. So
Yes.
I completely understand. Completely understand that.
So, Britt, I do have another question for you, and we have about 7 or so minutes left in you all panels. How do you, okay, excuse me, beyond immediate search and rescue efforts, what long-term strategies do you believe can prevent cases of missing Black women in the future?
So beyond the immediate search and rescue efforts, I definitely think implementing long-term strategies is essential to prevent these cases from happening altogether. So as a veteran Black woman in law enforcement, I'm deeply engaged in this issue. And so I advocate for several approaches, right? First, community outreach and education, engaging with communities through outreach programs, educational initiatives, to raise awareness about personal safety, about resources available for reporting missing persons, and what we should say and emphasize when we are reporting those. Mind you, people are in crisis mode when they're calling about their loved ones going missing, but it's still vital to at least have that foundation. And strategies for preventing abduction and exploitation. Second is going to be addressing systemic inequities. So advocating for policy changes, like we mentioned before, advocating for resource allocation to address systemic inequities that contribute to the vulnerability of Black women in the first place. So we're talking poverty, lack of access to education or health care, mental health care, over-policing and marginalized communities. And so there's definitely a balancing act that goes when there may be high crime in a particular area, and just finding creative, strategic ways to not just throw down the hammer, but be surgical with it, as I'll say. But also empowerment programs, implementing empowerment programs that provide Black women with access to the education that I spoke about, job training, economic opportunities, and support services to enhance their resilience and reduce the risk of exploitation and victimization. These programs would or should prioritize mental health services to address trauma. We've all experienced trauma collectively as Black women, as Black people, as people of color. Life skills training, because when we start engaging in all of these skill building, we now become situationally aware. We now flex all these different muscles that make us more communicative with our family members, being able to move through heightened emotions so that we can still get a point or information across. But we want to equip individuals with essential tools for navigating challenges and crisis prevention measures to empower individuals to proactively address potential risks and to protect ourselves from harm overall. Lastly, I'll say community policing and trust building is paramount. Fostering trust between law enforcement agencies and our communities, marginalized and otherwise. It definitely has to come through with cultural competency and transparent communication to encourage reporting of crimes. A lot of people do not report their family members missing for a long time because they don't trust. So supporting victims and survivors, enhancing support services for victims and survivors of violence, definitely trauma-informed care and counseling, legal assistance and advocacy. I'm a big proponent of ambassadorship. So you have people in the police department that have a vested interest in solving these cases and bringing justice or loved ones home. We have to identify those individuals and empower Black women to seek help and break the cycle of that victimization. There's so many other things, but I want to just leave it at that. So be able to start the conversation in that regard.
Thank you. Dr. Cleveland, I do want to end with asking you a really important question. Can you talk to us about, once you have a private investigator, how do you manage the information they give you when you have the press, the public, and even family members wanting updates? You have all these people trying to get in front of the story. How should the families manage all of that?
Oh, wow. That is a great one, because over and over again, you see so many people that want to be involved in the case. And some people who may want to be involved and get the information may also have a contributing hand in affecting the case and involved in the person missing. There's sometimes family members that don't want to believe the loved one would hurt that person. So they have that loved one involved in the search, receiving the information, knowing what direction law enforcement is going in, and private investigator. So when you share that, it is so hard for the family to accept that someone within your family, your circle of receiving the information about your loved one, went out and was able to discard the information. You know, when you have someone who is abusive and you're in an abusive relationship and you know that domestic violence has happened, some people do not take it as the victim does not take it and share with family. So family members may not know that this have been an abusive relationship, volatile relationship, and the number one suspect is that person. Just because they helped, they put out signs, they talked about it, and then they may have in the investigation redirect law enforcement so it wouldn't look like it was what it is. So with that said, there's sometimes when you're investigating things and you want to direct a family in a different way and they do not want to, there's not much that you can do but continue to investigate your case and get the information and give it to law enforcement, or take that information in and retreat it to where it needs to be. Because telling too many people who are the victims what information they have can also turn around to be bad for you. So it is so important that you have an organization that can keep everything confidential, and that the information that's shared with the family, let them make the final decision. No, all decisions that you give them won't be what they want to hear, but it's the facts of what they need to hear.
Thank you both so much for coming on and representing. I mean, let's keep it, real, that when people hear law enforcement, there's a very negative, sometimes perspective, and it kind of shuts them down. What we want people to do is be inspired to reach out to law enforcement and advocate and make them do what they need to do. And whether we feel like they want to or not, we have rights, and we should be treated as such. We should be, when we go missing, we should not be automatically be labeled as runaways.
Yes.
So thank you very much. Okay. Excuse me. Sorry about that. All right, we will be moving on to our next panel. These are the voices of the movement. So I'm trying to contain it. We have 4 of them. We only have a limited amount of time, but these are the voices we need to hear from, because they are the ones who are sharing the story. These are the women who are making sure that we are saying their names. And not their names, and the names of the missing. So we want to go ahead and introduce them. We have Ronetta Rideout of Massage and Wild Murders podcast, a true crime podcast dedicated to shining light on the stories of murdered Black women and girls. She is also nominated for 3 true crime awards at this time. So we'll be giving you information later to make sure you vote for her. We also have Black Girl Unlost, which is a YouTube platform that spotlights the injustices of girls and women of color who tragically lost their lives through senseless violence. And then we have Asa Todd and Nikki Irene from Black Girl Missing Podcast, a podcast dedicated to telling the stories of Black girls who have gone missing in the United States. All right. Hello, hello, hello. A moment, here we go. Okay. Hi, welcome, Voices of the Movement. Hello, hello. I'm trying to get my podcast voice there. Hello, welcome, Voices of the Movement. I'm Casey. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so we're going to start with Ronetta Rideout. Ronetta, how do you prioritize the voices and perspectives of missing Black women and their families in your storytelling?
I put myself in their families' positions, to be honest. Just when you showed the slide for active cases right now, I started crying, and I cried the entire time that everyone was talking because it's just in my spirit. And so that empathy that I have is what really pushes me to do this, because it is hard. And I want to make sure that I speak about these stories with respect, because as we all know, if you're not careful about what you say, despite whatever personal opinions you have, you can do more harm than good. So that's really how I approach my storytelling from that perspective.
Thank you. Black Girl Unlost. Would you like to introduce yourself real quick, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's afternoon here on my time zone, but thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm Mika Samaya, creator of Black Girl Unlost.
All right. How do you ensure that the stories of missing Black women are told with empathy, respect, and sensitivity in your true crime YouTube channel?
All right, so I narrowed it down to a few bullet points. So I'll start with the bullet points and then kind of fluff each one of them out. So the first bullet point is centering the voices of those directly impacted. Next, making sure that I humanize the victims outside of them just being a story or a statistic. Respecting the privacy and consent of the families. Contextualizing the stories. Most importantly, avoiding victim blaming or any type of speculation. Remaining objective in my storytelling. I kind of keep that for like the comment sections of my YouTube channel. So, but when I present that, just making sure that I stick to facts outside of any type of personal opinions, and including diverse perspectives and expertise. So going back to centering the voices of those directly impacted. So making sure that I prioritize the perspectives and experiences of the missing women themselves, as well as their families, friends, and the community, allowing them to share their stories in their own words and ensuring that their voices are heard all throughout the podcast. One of my anytime I cover a story, I always start out all of my stories with the humanization of the victims. I think that's so important in understanding who these individuals are prior to their demise. So avoiding sensationalizing or reducing the missing women to just mere statistics or stereotypes. Instead, making sure that I portray them as complex individuals with hopes, dreams, and relationships, if they are in relationships, and sharing details about their lives, their personalities, their contributions to their communities, respecting the privacy and consent of the family. So I can't say that I have had the family consent for each and every story that I've covered. I will honestly say that. However, for the majority of my stories, I do ensure that I obtain consent from the families and loved ones prior to reporting on the stories, and before sharing personal details or sensitive information. Also ensuring that I'm respecting their boundaries and privacy preferences, refraining from exploiting their pain or trauma for entertainment purposes. I think that's really important. As far as contextualizing the stories, providing historical, social, cultural context to help listeners better understand like the broader issue outside of just this one particular story. And lastly, again, avoid victim blaming or speculation. So refrain from engaging in speculation or spreading any type of solidified rumors. So going back to, I think it was Dr. Slakoff that was talking about like the use or misuse sometimes of social media. I'm really big on like, I always get like posts from subscribers that'll say, hey, I seen this posted on social media, or I seen this on TikTok. But again, going back to respecting the family's privacy. I always ensure that if I do receive some random social media post, just to kind of run it past the family to see if this is in fact true. And if I'm unable to get that confirmation, I just won't even post it until the news puts it out. And even sometimes when the news puts information out, sometimes it's not valid. And I'm sure all of us can relate to that. Lastly, including diverse perspectives and expertise. So I try to consult with experts, advocates, and community leaders as often as possible who can provide additional insight and expertise on that particular case. So whether it be a case focusing on domestic violence or a case of just missing Black women, but just kind of getting that background information to help contextualize the story and the content.
Thank you. Now we have two members of Black Girl Missing podcast, and we'd like to ask you, I'm not sure who's going to field which question, but how do you strike a balance between the storytelling aspect of true crime and delving into the broader societal factors of these cases?
Well, for Black Girl Missing podcast, all of our cases focus on Black girls under the age of 18. So that's a little bit different from us and other podcasts that are kind of in our niche. And for us, there isn't really a balance because true crime for us is the societal factor. The difference between Black podcasts in this genre is that we don't make it alluring. It's not sexy to us. It's not fun. It's not funny. We're not making like cute little jokes where there are other true crime podcasts that do that. We spend a significant portion of each episode analyzing some of the systemic failures that create some of these very complex stories. And we receive a lot of mixed feedback as a result, but we know and are comfortable with knowing that our approach always centers the missing and we don't stray from that. And Asa, I think you might want to add on to that.
Right. And like Nikki was saying, the societal factors are pretty much the whole thing. We aren't telling these stories just for the sake of telling stories. So inputting those, understanding and analyzing those societal factors are also important to understanding the whys and hows. And you don't get anywhere to fixing the problems unless you know the whys and hows. Renetta, can you share examples of how you have worked to amplify marginalized voices within the true crime genre?
So similarly to what Mika said when she referenced that she tries to, communicate directly with the families, I do that as well. I also cannot say that I have been able to get in touch with everyone whose loved one story that I have told. But when I do, we become like this. And that is how I try to keep spreading their loved one's story. Additionally, I do stuff like this. I working with you and partnering with Shalissa in the Mother's Brunch. That's a community event that is dedicated for the families of, domestic violence victims. So I try to amplify their voices outside of just the podcast. What am I doing as a person? How do I share their story outside of that platform? Because the podcast is just one way that I can do that. The other way is when they have trusted me with their story, I share it pretty much at every opportunity I get. I'm that annoying person that you could go to brunch with and I'll tell you about my friend whose daughter is missing, So I do that and I feel like it is a way to keep their voices active without them having to lift a finger. And it doesn't cost me anything. I have a big mouth and I like to talk anyway, so I'm unbothered either way. But that's just, I guess the short answer is I really try to get involved in the community on a personal level.
Back to Black Girl Unlost. What strategies do you employ to keep this issue at the forefront of public consciousness and maintain momentum for change?
Okay, so consistent storytelling, or just consistently sharing. I know for my YouTube channel, I try as best as I can to highlight a story on a daily basis, while also making sure I maintain my own mental health, because we all know that sometimes this work can be a bit heavy. So I definitely encourage everyone to still make sure that you're creating that balance. And again, even with the consistency, it's key to ensuring that these stories remain visible, they stay in the algorithm, they continuously remain relevant to the public. We know that we're living in a quick society today where you can have the biggest story one minute and the next day something else happened. And unfortunately, these crimes are happening so often that a story could be the highlight one day and then tomorrow is completely forgotten. So consistency is always key. Collaboration with activists and organizations. So partnering with activists, advocacy groups and organizations that are focused on what it is that you're reporting on, just to get that additional support. And also in order to reach out to a broader audience. So your audience now knows what information you receive from your collaborative partner and vice versa. So it's also a swapping of information. Engaging with the affected community. So the way the engagement looks in what I do is just always getting into those comments. I think a lot of YouTubers tend to, they post a video, but they fail to actually read the comments and read the feedback that they get from those videos. And I think that that's also important in just thinking forward of how can I better communicate these issues, or this person gave me these resources that I now can use and share out to my audience. So engagement is important to ensure that people aren't just listening to your story, but they also understand. If they have questions, answer them. If they have questions that you may not know the answer to right then and there, let them know, listen, I'll put a pin in it. I'll go research that and get back to you. Because again, ultimately the goal is to continue to spread the information and provide resources. Proper utilization of social media and digital platforms. So again, only posting information that you know to be valid and that you've properly gotten consent from the family to post. And this is something that is a bullet point for me that I personally have not done yet, but it's something that's on my list. Creating educational initiatives. So developing educational programs, workshops, and materials to raise awareness about these continuous issues. Providing opportunity, and with that, it provides opportunities for dialogue, learning, and reflection to challenge those stereotypes and to promote empathy and solidarity. Last, something else that's also on my to-do list is supporting those grassroots initiatives. Currently, unfortunately, I'm traveling a lot now, but I know there are ways to reach out on a virtual level. So supporting those grassroots initiatives, those local organizations that also want to get the word out, but may not have the platform or the numbers to be able to do so. And empowering local leaders and organizers to drive change from the ground up and providing them with the necessary tools and networks to amplify their impact.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm learning so much from all of these panelists and from this task force. And I hope this won't be the last time we get everyone together and do this. You guys, this has been amazing. So let's keep this going. Black Girl Missing. What unique advantages does podcasting offer in telling the stories of missing Black women and their families?
So for us, podcasting allows us to have some control over the framing of the stories. So we get to bring in nuance that isn't going to be part of conversations from large corporate backed media companies. It allows us to allows people that are usually overlooked or are considered too radical or have more to say than a 30-second soundbite to get information out there. And we don't have to worry about the comfort of anybody other than the people that are affected. So we don't have anybody telling us what we can and cannot say. And we get into some of the ugly truths that show not just where systems are breaking down or purposely not working in our favor, but also how we are complicit in some of the ugly truths of why Black girls and women do not get the attention that they deserve when they go missing.
Okay, I didn't know if Nikki was going to chime in there. Maybe she'll do the next one. You good, Nikki?
I do want to add something to that in addition to the nuance in the context that we can add that news stories don't have, we get an opportunity to correct the tone. We did, there were comments a little bit earlier about the tone. It gives us a chance to say, I know that you saw this on the news or you read this, but let me tell you what it really is. Or let me tell you that these are all of these different factors that were not included in that news story. And again, like we cover children. So while we can't always talk to the families, because sometimes, to be honest, the families are why they are missing sometimes. So we can't really talk to them. But there's also an empathetic context that comes with that also. Because we're Black, because we're women, there are a lot of times cracks that we fall through because we didn't have a community safety net. So if something bad happened to a child at the hands of a family member, now what would have happened had that family member been better supported? So instead of shaming and finger wagging, we make sure that we cover all of the bases so that people can, like Mika was saying earlier, humanizing that entire family and saying, even though something bad may have happened, we need to think about that, because the solutions are not just in saying this person's guilty or this person did something wrong. It's also, how did society fail all of these people?
And Casey, can I piggyback on that as well?
Yes.
To Nikki's point that in doing this ourselves, being, grassroots media folks, we are taking charge of the narrative, and we're also choosing not to speak on some of the things that are being perpetuated about the victims and their families. Unfortunately, there are not enough people operating with that intention that have chosen to cover true crime stories. And I have seen in cases like with Alexis Ware, where social media folks have really damaged not only the reputation of the victim, but caused immense hurt to the families. And so by folks with integrity choosing to tell these stories with empathy and respect, we are taking charge and not perpetuating any of that drama and spreading rumors and sharing information that we know isn't true because it hasn't been proven yet. So I think it's just super important that anyone who decides to step into this space, because everybody and their mama has a podcast these days, and true crime is, very entertaining, for a lot of people who like to consume it. If you're going to step into that arena, then you have to have this kind of perspective. If you do not approach these stories with the same kind of respect that you would approach yourself, your child, your mama, your sister, your cousin, don't do it. Because the failure of doing that or not doing that, it has a much bigger cost to the overall progress of the case and the long-term impact to the families that have to live with this. We can change stories, but they don't get to turn it off. It is day in, day out. And that story that we posted online and we forgot about 2 years ago, that's still their life. And they can still see that. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. We're going to have one more question for each of you, and then we're going to go ahead and have our 15-minute break. During the break, we will be dropping into the chat a link to another one of Moni's ceremony sound baths, if you want to do that during the break. Also, we have the YouTube for Cynthia's story. We have, I think, part 1, because I just heard Tiffany say there's a part 2. We're going to drop that too for someone who may want to watch that during the break, or you may want to run and get something to eat, drink, whatever you need to do during your break. Okay, so Ronetta, we're going to ask you, we're going to actually combine the last 2 questions for you. What ethical considerations do you take into account when telling the stories of missing Black women, particularly in cases involving trauma or violence? And how do you ensure that your podcast episodes create safe and supportive spaces for survivors, families, and communities impacted by the disappearance of Black women?
I think that not victim blaming is a really huge part of it. And it sounds like it might be easy to do, but it isn't easy to do because we're all going, we all are regular people. We have our opinions about things. But it is super important to not victim blame. So that is something that I try very hard not to do. And the other thing is, while I like to be detailed in my research and in my storytelling, I try not to harp on the violence. I cover it because that's part of the story, but I do not harp on it. I am not trying to entertain people. I'm trying to inform people about what happened, the dangers about whatever situation. And it's really, really important for me that I do not traumatize my listeners either. For a short period of time, I would remember to put a trigger warning in the beginning of the episodes. Admittedly, I'm not good at doing that. I think that if folks are listening to my podcast, they know that I'm going to be thorough. So there is going to be content there that may be hard to hear, but I really try not to focus on that. I focus on the larger picture. This person is missing, or this person has been killed. There's someone out there who's responsible. Help the family find them. There are children left behind. What can we do to help them? Law enforcement didn't do what they needed to do, so now we're here. Like, I focus on those things, and I think that that overall is how I stay centered and how I remain respectful and ethical in my approach, especially as it pertains to people who may have survived and their families if they didn't.
Thank you. And I just want to, wait, I'm saying Micah, right? Or Mika? I'm saying it right.
It's Mika.
Oh, Mika, sorry. What unique advantages does
Samaya.
YouTubing offer in telling the stories of missing Black women and their families?
Okay, so the Black Girl Missing podcast actually we touched on some of the same bullet points because they had the same exact question as I did. But I know for me, the top two would be the long form of storytelling. So going back to what you said earlier about the missing white woman syndrome, and when white women tend to be reported, they like to use those buzzwords to make them, to make us feel more empathetic of the situation and to make them appear more important. So with the long form of storytelling through podcasting or YouTube, we get that unlimited amount of time to really get a chance to, again, humanize the individuals and give the audience a chance to feel empathy for the victims because of the buzzwords that we are actually allowed to use that the news do not cover. So just that uncensored method of storytelling. Also, the audience engagement and activism. It fosters a sense of community. So I would say about 90% of the time, that when people are watching your video or listening to your podcast, it's because they're actually choosing to do so. And so now you foster the sense of community of people who you already know. When even going into future videos or future podcasts, like, okay, this is who I'm catering to. These are the people that I need to ensure that I'm continuously providing those buzzwords for and humanizing the victims and rolling out these stories this way in order to not just gain an audience, but to also maintain that audience and other individuals who might come along the way. And also with the long form storytelling, I forgot to mention earlier that I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Miss Collier, Makiana Johnson's mother. And I'm so happy that her family is finally receiving justice. And going back to what you said, she is such a strong woman. Like let me tell you, I kind of get emotional because like she is just, unless you have to meet her to actually understand. Like it's just almost, it gives you chills, you know what I'm saying? And Shadir, I'm so sorry for the loss of your sister. I did not get to collaborate with your family. However, I did cover Crystal's story on my channel, and I did about 4 videos for the initial story. And I'm really big on updates. So that's also another thing that sometimes the news fails to do. Go into in-depth updates and continue providing us with context of that initial highlighting of that story.
Thank you so much.
No problem. No problem. And again, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that's pretty much it on my end. Again, I don't want to repeat what was already said. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. And going back to Shalissa, it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but I want to make an observation that as Black women, we often hold on to that I'm strong, but sometimes it's okay not to be strong, right? I mean, Shalissa is definitely an amazing, strong woman. But when she mentioned that the trial was going to start yesterday, and she was like, well, yeah, girl, yeah, sister, I'll be there. No, you won't. we got you. You don't have to do for everyone.
Right.
You take, and when I mentioned it to Renetta was like, what? Like, she better not think of even trying to get up on a Saturday morning after starting her, her daughter's, the murder trial started. So sometimes it's okay not to be strong. Sometimes it's okay to take care of yourself, stay in the bed, watch a little TV, relax. You don't have to, just because you made a commitment. We understand. People will understand. Okay, so thank you for acknowledging her strength. All right, and the last question for Asa or Nikki, can you discuss the importance of, and again, some of this we've covered, but just gonna ask, make sure we cover it. Can you discuss the importance of portraying missing Black women as multifaceted individuals who are complex and dignified?
So the big issue, one of the biggest issues here is misogynoir, and it's inherently dehumanizing. It's not just the reason that we go missing so often, it's why we don't get the efforts from law enforcement or the publicity about us going missing. So being able to bring that humanity to the stories of the girls and women we cover, it's part of how we dismantle that oppressive system of misogynoir. And we have to show that these, for us, that these girls are loved. They are people who loved. And as human beings, we're all fallible, but we are redeemable. And it's one of the, being able to show that is important to getting people to care. And nobody's a perfect victim, but especially us, we're never going to be viewed as a perfect victim. So being able to say, we are not perfect, but we deserve to be treated as valuable, is why it's so important to humanize us.
Yeah.
I just
Nikki?
want to add to that we're people, right? We're people, and people are multifaceted, and folks need to just accept that. And I know that in the media, Black women and girls are always seen as the shero, the strong, the this, the that. She's too strong, she's too this, she's too loud. And don't let her be, a little too dark. Now she's all these other things, because the colorism that comes along with missing Black girls and women plays such a significant role in the silence that we hear, because it is deafening. And when we allow people to be portrayed as anything but a kaleidoscope of life, we are allowing that dishonesty, that disinformation, and the lack of integrity. And we don't play that on my podcast. We become complicit in sowing seeds of doubt in our people unless we have the courage to say repeatedly, these are people who are to be valued no matter what. We see so many of the stories of missing, like, teenage girls, and it's, oh, well, she was fast, or she was ghetto, or she was this, and she's got purple hair, she's got these big earrings. I don't care about none of that. She was still somebody's baby girl. She's still somebody's little sister. And I'm going to go up for her until I can't go up for her no more.
Thank you for those beautiful words from all of you. I feel like I'm overwhelmed and with emotion. Like, we're really learning a great deal right now. I had to do a qualifying exam, and I had to talk about this. And, I get a little excited, and I started talking, and then the real Casey came out, the South Central Casey came out, and I was trying to be professional, but I said, they think Black women are out here just rendezvousing. And to this day, all my classmates, they are tickled pink, and every blue moon they'll go, because we're not out here just rendezvousing. So no one steal that. I'm gonna make that my tagline. We are not out here just rendezvousing. Okay, that doesn't, just because we're out living our lives does not mean we deserve not to be cared for. Okay, so we have about 4 minutes before we go to our break. You all have been wonderful and patient, and I feel like time is actually flying. We are basically finished with the first half. So those of you who are like, I was only coming on for a little bit, I gotta go, try to stay around, because after the break, we do have two very important panels. We have the activists, the activists, legislation, and cybersecurity. And we're gonna hear from our community partner, get all the resources, as well as hear some final remarks from our task force. And if you stick around for the survey, you could win a special prize. So any questions before we go on to the break? We have a couple of minutes, or before we take a break. Anything anyone wanted to say that they didn't get a chance to? No? Okay.
I actually did want to add
Yes.
onto what Nikki had been saying earlier about the kaleidoscope of life. I really loved that, by the way. That was beautiful. It kind of called to mind as you were speaking. I was thinking about a case about Tiani Theus, who was a 16-year-old girl who was found murdered here in Los Angeles on the side of the freeway that I drive like 5 times a week. And unfortunately, this child, because that's what she was, she's the same age as my daughter right now, she was a victim of human trafficking. And it was very obvious that she was, because on her social media, she had photos that told that story. And the reason why I bring this up is because when we are hearing these stories that people are telling about these crimes committed against our women and children, we need to remember that not all circumstances are what they present as. A child cannot be a willing prostitute or sex worker. They can't be. And that's like a bottom line. So I don't care if her pictures looked how you perceive them to look. That's still a child who can't give consent about that. So it's just one of the many ways in which the story can sort of be misconstrued. And if you're going to be telling these stories, we have to be cognizant of that and keep that at the forefront of our mind. We have to be careful what we say, because the mainstream media is already going to say those things. They're going to say this child was a sex worker, or this child was promiscuous, this child was a runaway. But really, this child was a victim, and her mother had been tragically, severely injured in a hit and run case that is still unsolved today because California Highway Patrol has not taken the lead on that case like they should have, even though there was video. They didn't go and get the video. They just completely ignored her case. And as a result, her mother laid up in the hospital for months and months and months, unable to talk, unable to walk. And this child, what happened to her? A straight A student. She went down the rabbit hole. And so that's just a little bit of her life. And so when I would see these stories about her in the media, it really just made me want to pull my hair out because they weren't really representing her. And so that's why I did the story on her. I felt super compelled. But what you said, Nick, you really like called to mind Tiani, and so I wanted to share that. And if you don't know her name, I have a podcast episode about her. You can find it on my IG website, whichever, because it is a story that needs to be told, and it's still unsolved today.
Yeah, both myself and my community partner, we went to school off that Manchester, Florida, like that exit. Like that's very familiar territory. And some of these things are happening in our communities that we're just not hearing about, and we just have to amplify these stories. We have to have more symposiums like this. We have to gather. This cannot just be once. I need to see you all again. We're going to take a small break. Do not leave, or if you leave, come back, because we have so much more great information for you. Again, in the chat, you're going to find a link to another sound bath by Ceremony Sounds, as well as one of the YouTube stories regarding Cynthia. Thank you so much, and we'll be back soon.